Welcome to another Liquid Bullet Productions. If I said to you, Godfather of Glasgow, who springs to mind? I bet a lot of you, the automatic thought is Arthur Thompson. And indeed, he was known as the Godfather of Glasgow. But I'm talking about the real OG Godfather of Glasgow, Walter Norval, king of the infamous Twilight Zone and leader of the gang XYY. Walter Norval was the first Glasgow gangland godfather. He was also one of the most infamous armed robbers in British criminal history. He was feared as much as he was respected. A fighting man who didn't think twice about using extreme violence. Walter Norval was born in 1928 in the Possil area of Glasgow, spending his formative years in Garscube Road, known to locals as the High Road. At the tender age of 8, he had started out in his criminal career, stealing potatoes and coal briquettes and selling them on. He would spend his days skipping school and dodging police. At 16 years old, Walter was sent to Borstal for robbing a newsagent's with a fake gun and breaking into offices in Hope Street. He was called up for national service and he was adamant that he was not completing it. After escaping several times from the service camp, he was given his wish as he was sentenced to 18 months hard labour for slashing another soldier with a piece of glass, which meant he was unable to complete his national service. As a youngster growing up in North Glasgow, in amongst the gambling, the brothels, the dance halls, the extreme violence, murder and mayhem, Walter served his apprenticeship, running messages for the toughest of gangsters and standing guard over the vast sums of money from the gambling schools. In 1963, Walter Norval was involved in a backstreet brawl with another local hard man by the name of Big Mick Gibson. In this altercation, Mick Gibson bit a part of Walter's ear off. Weeks later, Walter tracked him down to a local pub, went in and stabbed him 8 times. These incidents were later referred to as the War of Norval's Ear. Walter went on the run after this, and as you would expect, soon after was caught by police. Like many before him and after him, Walter knew exactly who to phone. Legendary lawyer Joe Beltrami. Beltrami hired advocate Nicky Fairbairn, who went on to become Solicitor General, who was appointed by Maggie Thatcher. Nicky Fairbairn managed to get Walter's attempted murder charge dropped down to an assault, which got Walter 3 years in prison. Over the next several years, Walter Norval made his name and added to his growing reputation in the gangs, leading to working the pubs and clubs and bookies before a natural progression to armed robbery. Walter and his numerous foot soldiers carried out many high-value robberies using an arsenal of weapons and explosives which were stashed all over the city. Over a 3-year period in the mid-70s, Walter's gang carried out numerous audacious and violent robberies, mostly payrolls for hospitals and offices, but also post office, banks and building societies all over Scotland. Walter and his gang would quite often escape with large sums of money, up to £20,000 at a time, which is around £120,000 in our money today. The target for these robberies would be checked and planned for weeks and weeks. They would also watch and scrutinise the routes and movements of the security vans. Norval would also use 2 getaway cars just to confuse any police who may give chase after a raid had been carried out. In 1967, after being released from his 3-year prison sentence, Walter started putting together the best armed robbers and organising them into a very violent and ruthless outfit. In the commission of their crimes, the robbers terrified petrified workers. There was shots fired at several robberies. The police knew who was committing all these robberies, but they had no evidence to make any arrests. Graham Pearson was the police chief leading Strathclyde Police's serious crime squad that went on to capture Norval and several of his gang members in 1977. A now retired Mr Pearson said to the Glasgow Times in an interview, "The armed robberies were done with the level of organisation and sophistication you normally associate with the military or the police. The XYY gang would recce the place that they were about to rob, particularly if it involved a wages snatch. They used to cycle around about the various locations to avoid suspicion and see what days the money was delivered and then put in a plan in place for the robbery. Once the suspects had left the scene, they would change to a second car after a few miles to throw the police off the scent. Sometimes Norval would be in the second getaway vehicle. The first car would be left in a remote location like an underpass to cause confusion for officers who were in pursuit. The scale of it was quite new. We had never seen anything like it before." Mr Pearson also said all the detectives working on catching the XYY gang and Norval had to be permanently armed for their own protection. Mr Pearson carried on, "Sums that were being stolen varied from £15,000 to £20,000. It didn't give them a life of luxury, but it was lavish compared to being unemployed. The XYY gang were spending money as quick as they could earn it, and they had to continue with the robberies to keep the money coming in." As in a lot of cases over the years, the downfall of the XYY gang was an informant. One of their gang caught on another raid turned grass. One of Walter's most trusted and loyal lieutenants, well, not as loyal as what Walter thought, was apprehended with two other gang members whilst in the commission of a robbery at a post office in Buckie near North Aberdeen, and this was the person who turned grass. This was also the first ever known case in Scottish criminal history to use what is now known as a supergrass. 13 men, including Walter Norval, were arrested using Henry's information, and this was when the police realised the extent of Walter Norval's gang. Numerous robberies. 13 men and Walter Norval were arrested using Henry's information, and this was when the police realised the extent of Norval's gang. There was multiple large robberies, hundreds of foot soldiers, and stashes of weapons and explosives all around Glasgow. There were so many defendants that they had to have 4 separate trials. The judges had to be guarded by armed police at all times, and even the jurors had to have armed bodyguards. This was the first time Scotland had ever seen a trial involving an organised crime gang. The trials were due to start in November 1977, but in an effort to destroy evidence and paperwork, the High Court was bombed. Walter's daughter Rita Gunn and her husband William Gunn were charged with conspiracy to damage the North Court. Rita was acquitted on all charges, but her husband William ended up sentenced to 5 years in prison for making threats to kill a lead witness in the case. Another leading witness was in prison at the time and had to have a constant police guard, as well as kept in solitary confinement, and he still managed to get scalded with boiling water. Throughout the trial, it became apparent just how clever Walter was and how little he'd shared with others, and he was the one that knew everything. In true old school style, Walter said nothing. The remaining gang members went on to committing more robberies, and some becoming major players in organised crime. Walter served 9 years of the 14, and when he was released there was a whole new breed of criminal, and Walter Norval's time as the first Godfather of Glasgow was over. In June of 1999, a 71-year-old Walter Norval found himself back in the dock, facing possession of cannabis charges. His lawyers told the court it was for pain relief for his arthritis, and all the charges were dismissed. Walter Norval passed in August 2014 from pneumonia at the age of 85. He'd previously battled cancer on 2 occasions and won. His funeral was just what you would expect from Walter Norval's character, and someone with the class you only find from an old school gangster or villain. His coffin was carried by members of the Blue Angel biker gang into the crematorium as the Clash bank robber blasted out. So I'm going to end this with a little quote from Walter Norval. So in his words, "Gangsters were hard men. They fought in the pubs and they made names for themselves, but it was amongst themselves. But nowadays, the people who call themselves gangsters don't do any hard work themselves. They just pay someone a couple of grand to go and hurt people for them." Remember and give us a thumbs up if you're enjoying the content. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss anything. And please share. And remember, come check us out on our social media pages. You'll find us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok and Instagram.